On Mark, then, and welcome you to the program and the Federal Reserve. What's going on with Trump and the Fed?
Well, I recall during Trump's first term, I was at an Ann Arbor store and I picked up a newspaper, and Trump did, to his credit at that time, make some overtures about reining in the Fed, at least to a degree. Now, this is a completely exclusive report that I'm about to give in the sense that the current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and we can put that up, gave a speech March 6th to the Economic Club of New York. He happens to be a member of that economic club. And this is something that got very little press. It was only covered by the Treasury Secretary's own YouTube and C-SPAN, which of course is a public utility funded by the cable companies, and then the Economic Club's own YouTube channel. That's the only coverage it got. So this is something of an exclusive. And what Bessent had to say to the club is shown here. Trump's recent executive order that requires the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Federal Reserve to submit regulatory actions for review at the Office of Management and Budget will improve analytical rigor, discipline, and accountability. So he's kind of making the Fed funnel a lot of its regulatory ideas through the OMB, which is not hugely significant, but there's more than meets the eye to that. Now, Nasdaq, of course, the Wall Street stock entity, they took notice of that right away, as is shown here in this article. And they were one of the only entities that has been watching what Bessent has been doing. And they actually went back prior to his economic club speech, and they went back prior to when Trump was president. And Scott Bessent was simply an economic advisor last October to Trump. And they picked up on something else that runs sort of parallel. Trump's proposed shadow Fed share plan challenges Jerome Powell's authority, Jerome Powell being the current chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And so this is another area where Bessent and Trump are looking at kind of reining in the Fed and adding a little more government oversight. And here's something in terms of detail from Nasdaq, the shadow chair proposal. Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, previously floated a controversial plan, as I noted, to establish a shadow Federal Reserve chair. Under this unprecedented proposal, the shadow chair would have no official authority or power, and yet the position would serve to challenge and critique current Fed decisions. This is Nasdaq explaining this. The appointed individual would likely become the next Fed chair after Jerome Powell's term expires in 2026. So it would sort of prep somebody more aligned with Trump to replace Powell. Moving on, this is what else Nasdaq had to say that explains the significance of this, the potential impact on monetary policy. This shadow chair could create significant complications for U.S. monetary policy implementation. This dual voice, as it describes it, might lead to, and I emphasize this, market uncertainty that would likely increase as investors and financial institutions attempt to interpret conflicting signals from both the official and shadow Fed chairman. So NASDAQ, representing Wall Street, is a bit concerned about this. As this next slide also indicates, the institutional independence of the Fed, of course, is this all-important thing. Thou shalt not touch the Fed with any congressional or legislative or political concerns. The Fed has to be on total autopilot. So therefore, NASDAQ is concerned, saying this proposal raises significant concerns about the Fed's independence, a principle that has been fundamental to U.S. monetary policy for decades. In emphasis here, I put establishing a shadow chair could be seen as an attempt to circumvent the legal protections that ensure the Fed's autonomy from political pressure. And of course, they're concerned about the Fed's credibility itself being damaged here. And from there, we can move on a little bit more. And I talked to Conrad LeBeau about Bessent's speech to the Economic Club and about his idea for a shadow Fed chair that was, again, last fall before Trump was actually elected. So some of this stuff has been brewing for a while. And he saw some significance in it. It's kind of a wait and see. about that. Conrad has done a lot of very in-depth research on the Federal Reserve. He's written a book, A Critical View of the Federal Reserve Act, available at the website I'm giving here. That'll be in the show notes, I presume. But I wrote a little snippet on this, and Conrad is looking at the real swindle involved with the Federal Reserve, guys. He's looking at the specific ways that the U.S. government is shorted and swindled by the Fed. And he's trying with all his might to get the Trump administration looking beyond just regulatory changes and looking at the very heart of what the Fed does. And as it explains here, just to give some examples, each U.S. $1 bill costs the Fed 17 cents to have the U.S. print the money for the Fed. A 5, 10, and 20, and $50 bills each cost a little bit more per note. But in all cases, as Conrad outlines, the U.S. is swindled. The Fed's cost of printing $200 billion in U.S. currency is about $1 billion, despite the legal tender or face value of this same currency being 200 times greater. This fire sale of our currency to the privately owned banking system needs to stop, Conrad is saying. It has resulted in the loss, get this, of about $10 trillion in revenue for the U.S. in the last 110 years since the Federal Reserve was founded. So the U.S., besides having the potential to make a lot more revenue, or at least reasonably more revenue through the institution of tariffs, if the U.S. would actually get the full face value of the money that it produces for the Fed, then that would be another huge stream of revenue that would not involve taxing the American people. And so this really spells out that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you're not going to hear about in the regular news stream to try and rein in the Fed that's carrying over from Trump's first term when the Fed was pushing back a lot what Trump was doing back then. So these developments are pretty significant. It's a bit evolutionary, but I'll be keeping a close eye on them, and there'll be more in the weeks and months ahead. And we'll see how far Trump goes with the Fed. Will he go as far as he's going with tariffs? We'll soon find out.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, well let's